Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forsay, and we have to take a look at the latest on the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars, I actually saw them earlier this week in Philly on the road, and the Dallas Stars have looked pretty good, but there's still a lot of talk that they are a seller at this year's deadline. You look at their team in the standings. This could change here over the next couple of days. It's kind of like an update. You know, we're hearing a lot about guys getting traded and guys moving out, but the Dallas Stars on this East Coast road trip have done fairly well. They beat the Detroit Red Wings, they beat the Buffalo Sabres, they beat the Flyers, they beat the Devils, and they're kind of continuing that trip now, going down to Washington, where they're going to be back at home, and maybe they ride that momentum and continue that into this weekend. So it's going to be interesting what happens with Dallas, so I'm prefacing that at the beginning of this video. But there's a lot of talk about moves potentially coming for Jim Nill's Stars. So this is the first one from David Paginotta, and this is a Leafs rumor. So the Maple Leafs are believed to have inquired on Stars defenseman John Klingberg. So I don't know how serious that is. The Leafs definitely could give you the assets you want in a trade. I just made a video about the Leafs with that exact source and that information. But that's definitely something to look at because there's definitely a little bit of desperation right now in Toronto, and I think they could have the assets that the Stars want. You know, if you wanted to trade for a young guy, there are guys that the Leafs could give you in that type of trade for Klingberg. Really Robertson is probably the biggest one, Matthew Robertson, and that's the one I think the Stars would look at the most. But there are a couple of other guys in the wings that could come up as an option there. This is from Jeff Merrick, another team that the Stars could be linked to. The Hurricanes could be the most likely landing spot for Stars defenseman John Klingberg. Now, there's not a ton of context to this. I think he said this in his Jeff Merrick show. I don't know whether he said this was a free agent situation where he's most likely to sign this summer, or is this as a rental at the trade deadline? Two totally separate things. So I don't know the whole context to that, but if you look at the different scenarios, I could see Carolina being a fit for both. Carolina's looking to win the Cup this year. They're one of the top three teams, really the top dogs in that Metropolitan Division. They've been leading that conference for a lot of this season. So there's a lot to be said about Rod Brendamore's Hurricanes, which is already a stacked defense, best goals against average, least goals given up this season, one of the best penalty kills in the league. Like, Carolina is definitely a spot that Klingberg could fit nicely and kind of replace replace Dougie Hamilton, who they lost last summer to the New Jersey Devils, and would kind of allow a guy like Tony DeAngelo to slip into the lineup a little bit. And that adds that depth to their group that they could use. So that's the latest on those two teams in particular. We also got an update from Pierre LeBrun on the price tag for a guy like Klingberg. So John Klingberg could fetch a first-round pick, probably in 2022, right? A prospect, and another pick. Probably looking at a second, third, maybe fourth-round pick. I think that's that's pretty flexible because let's say you don't have that high-end prospect that you could give up, right? Perfect example, the Leafs, right? Matthew Robertson, you probably trade a first, Robertson, and a fourth. Yet if you're another team that doesn't have that prospect pool, maybe you give up a first, a second, and a lesser prospect. I think that's pretty good by Jim Nill and the Stars, giving some leeway, some flexibility for teams to come at him with some maybe different offers than just two former first-round picks and a first. It's very cutthroat and doesn't leave you much room there. Because what if there's a guy that's a really good second or third-round pick that became a top six forward? You're kind of limiting yourself. And I don't like when teams do that necessarily. How they value, Galchenyuk is a former first-round pick, third overall. Does he garner the same value as another guy, right? So I don't necessarily agree with that stuff. So I think the Stars have done a pretty good job in terms of the price tag. I think they made it very easy for a team to try and match that, and kind of gives them the opportunity to accept the 20 different offers and say, we're going to pick this one, that's the best offer, and go from there. I think at this point it's pretty clear he requested a trade at the end of 2021, meaning John Klingberg. I don't think we will see him in a Stars jersey in the fall, or for that matter this summer. He will be wearing new colors by the deadline. I think it's just, at this point, just water under the bridge and it's over. Now we have some follow-up to that. So this is more on the situation with Joe Pavelski, and I found this interesting. Again, from Jeff Merrick, he thinks if the Avalanche don't get Giroux, which they have been tied to the Flyers captain Claude Giroux, Joe Pavelski could be a player of interest. Now, I think there's definitely reason to believe that the Avalanche see themselves as a playoff team this year. They've been disappointed the last couple of years, getting maybe past the first round, but like last year, just struggling in the playoffs. So to add the Jared Bednar's army there in Colorado, maybe they get a guy like Joe Pavelski. He had some experience. He could play as a depth center. You've already got Nazem Kadri, who's going to the All-Star game. He's been really good this year. Obviously, Nathan McKinnon and Joe Pavelski really could be a lethal top 3 center group there for the Avalanche. And I think that is something that they have looked at really since Alex Kerfoot and JT Compher kind of moved around. They've been looking for that void there. And as some of the young guys develop, that could be a really nice spot for Pavelski as a rental. I think the Avalanche would be willing to pay that price tag. So now we go to the goalie front, and this is heading up to Edmonton. So it's believed the Oilers have discussed the possibility of Braden Holtby internally. They, if you guys remember, were a big player for Braden Holtby. It came down to Vancouver and Edmonton. He ultimately ended up going to the Canucks, where he signed a 2-year deal. He got bought out at the end of that first contract and found himself in Dallas. So, it would be kind of like, yeah, you didn't... we didn't want you then, but now as Holtby's agent and himself say, yeah, you know what, I wouldn't mind going there on a run to play with McDavid, Draisaitl, and the rest of the Oilers. So I don't know how much that ultimately played into it. Maybe the Oilers look at it like, listen, business is business. We couldn't get you then. We want you now. So that is something that they're looking at. And that is from Pierre LeBrun. This is also from Pierre LeBrun on the Dobby front. Anton Khudobin. I know you guys like when I say that. So the Oilers have interest in Anton Khudobin, also known as Dobby, but his contract term scares them. Again, he just signed that big contract this past summer, and a lot of people, including myself, are like, what are you doing there? So Dallas locked themselves into Khudobin. It's kind of something they can't get themselves out of. The Oilers are having PTSD with these long-term contracts for subpar goalies. They're dealing with that right now with Mikko Koskinen. Do they really want to do that with Khudobin, trading that in? I don't think so. And I think that's a big reason. When Anton Khudobin cleared waivers earlier this year, there was some thought maybe that the Oilers would take him. They couldn't take him because of that contract. They have way too many big contracts already. It didn't make sense then, and it still doesn't make sense today. So that is something that we've kind of been looking at in that regard. And to be honest, the Oilers could go for a cheaper option than Khudobin. Martin Jones, they could have had him for a 6th or 7th round pick, and he doesn't come at nearly the price tag. So, again, that's kind of the stuff that you're looking at here if you're the Dallas Stars. You just don't have the value in that. Braden Holtby's on the final year of his deal, so that's definitely a name that I think will definitely be generating interest. And he's been pretty good for the Stars here of recent. We haven't really heard his name in the rumor mill, but as the Oilers as the Stars go in the Jake Ottinger route, they may just look at a backup to fill that void, completely rid themselves. Ben Bishop will be bought out. He won't be bought out, but he's on LTIR. The Marian Hossa, I'm trying to think of the guy that was in Toronto. The guy that's never going to play again for the team, let's be honest. And he's just on LTIR. He's on Ben Bishop Island. Stefan Robida, thank you, from the Maple Leafs. And that's really, Lou Lamoriello was the first one to do that. So his money will be gone. So Bishop's gone. They look to maybe trade Holtby. They may look to buy out Khudobin this summer. And then it's Jake Ottinger and blank, whatever backup they want to throw in there. So that is the latest on the Dallas Stars. So we got a little bit of information with John Klingberg. We've heard that Joe Pavelski, on the final year of his contract, is going to be a name we'll hear about. I think we're going to start to hear more about Alexander Radulov as well. His contract ends this summer as well. He hasn't had the best season, but I think those three guys in particular, Klingberg, Radulov, and Pavelski, and as well as the goaltending. The Dallas Stars may look to completely clean house in that regard and just keep Jake Ottinger. Both Holtby and Hudobin seem to be on the trade block. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.